Hello, it's Phillip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. Today I'm looking at a book which I found fascinating to read. It's called Beyond Bias, and it's been published by the ARC Group, which is a Wilmington legal publication. The book has got a subtitle, Unleashing the Potential of Women in Law, been edited by Slater, and there are a large number of contributors whom I'll mention in a moment. The book, I think, is very important because it comes at a time when there are big changes taking place about personnel, certainly within law, and more widely within the employment community, or those people who are actually working, the working community, if I can put it that way. In other words, people with a job, whether it's private sector, public sector, self-employed or whatever. Now, Elizabeth and I gave our review for this book the following title: It is not as depressing as it seems. There are more women than men starting legal practice today. And I thought I'd start that off as a provocative statement because it's not quite as depressing. It doesn't have to be depressing at all, but for some people it might be, because perhaps it's been too long in coming, or there are too many women sort of getting the men out of the way. Whichever way you look at it, it's not actually depressing at all, because it's a movement forward. Let's look at the book first of all. There it is. There's the little spine, and then there's on the back some basic information which you can see there. It's a very small book. It's under 100 pages long. There's no index or anything like that at the back. You can see basic subheads which have been used. There are no sort of footnotes or anything like that. Excuse me. There's the front of the book there. And some basic information about ARC and all that stuff. And then you've got the contents section. And what you've got there, you've got various chapters. In fact, 9 chapters in total. And the contents show the name of the person and the detail of the chapter. Then you've got an executive summary right at the beginning. Always worth reading. It's an easy book to read quite quickly. It's looking very much at the role of women certainly in the legal community. And then you've got detail about the editor and the authors all the way through there. And then you see a lot of information. Very, very substantial people have written this book. Then the individual chapters. So the chapter number, then the title, and then the actual person who's written it. Then you get into the book itself. Some subheads, some figures, and so forth. In what I thought was actually quite an easy book to read, but a book which actually makes some quite important points. And the reason I got quite a long review is because I felt there was a lot to talk about with this particular book. It's not actually available on many of the main publishing websites, but I will be, obviously there is the YouTube channel I'm recording here, and it will be appearing in a number of different outlets at a later stage. But what do we say about the book? Well, the book's fundamentally about women and their future legal career prospects, which I think is an important thing to talk about in 2017, with changes taking place within the way we qualify and everything else. It arrives at a time, of course, of massive change and indecision in the United Kingdom about the direction the country is taking, because one of the biggest single problems has nearly always been about gender balance, and we've seen with the June 2017 parliamentary intake, that's after the general election, more balance than ever before. We've got a hung parliament, of course, but it's simply not enough to say that, because we've also got many more women than men actually studying to practice law at the moment. And I do believe, certainly amongst the ranks of solicitors, there are more females than males as solicitors. I know it's not the same at the bar, but certainly the number of people registering for the bar course, the bar school, there are more women than men. And that's an indication of the changes that are taking place. Now, this short art book of 9 chapters and 90 pages has been edited by Slater, and she brings together some very bright talent and bright views. And at a time when we enter a new occupational phase with the advent of the 4th Industrial Revolution, artificial intelligence and a complete change in the way that we conduct much of our business as the century opens up is clearly a statement that we need to have at this time as we start looking ahead. We do indeed go beyond bias but not just with gender equality, as the business structures and attitudes themselves that we face will change out of all recognition much more quickly probably than we realise. Now, the last 2 chapters are directly relevant to us in the legal profession, although all the chapters taken in and around are of substantial relevance as the battle for sexual equality continues in the 21st century. So the greatest strength of Beyond Bias, whilst we're at the current crossroad, is the credible weight we can attach to the 9 expert opinions so well researched on why we have probably now crossed the, what I call the Rubicon, that's the point of no return, on balanced gender discrimination. Now, it's thanks that we must give, I think, to individual experts with their formidable academic credentials and expertise in righting the wrong, that's the bias. So do read the executive summary first. The contributors of this book of essays on the continuing misevaluation of the human condition as far as the actions of men and women are concerned are the following people. And I'll give you the names because they're individually of quite substantial importance. Janice P. Brown, Paola Cecchi Dimiglio, I apologise in advance for the pronunciations, Aura A. Dial, Kathy Fleming, Carol Frolinger, Patricia K. Gillette, Debbie Epstein Henry, Catherine Larkin Wong and Ellen Ostrow. And what a great job they've done here. The chapter's very easy to read and they make their specific points very directly to the initiated and the uninitiated, and the issue has never really been about ability, just a bias, whether wholly or partly male initiated. And I say that as a male because I think frankly we have to look at it, and the reason I've done this review and I've written most of it myself is purely and simply because I would like to see the balance changing. We are not here of course to assign labels but to evaluate the work itself. So this book is one which is desperately needed in my view at a time when the glass ceiling, as it's sometimes called, is being seriously breached, and rightly too. Before a complete realignment occurs in the middle of this century, which seems to me inevitable, with the full effects of AI and IT on the jobs market, law specifically included, obviously we've got to see from that and experience from that what's going to happen next. Now, can I just point out Audra Dial's comments, final thoughts at the end of the book, which are worth mentioning, for one word, assumption. For it's assumptions which permeate the entire basis of the book's mission. These primarily male assumptions, which are fundamentally wrong historically, but have remained a bias to keep women down, and that's a blunt truth. Of course, all issues of equality go much further than the policy of whether the face fits or not, because it's always being much more intricate and complex than that. Now, Dahl looks at rainmaking, concluding that I've since learned that it takes a lot more than good legal work to develop and retain clients. Yes, of course, and in the future, whilst client development takes a lot of time and energy, she's right to say that it's really all about getting to know other people and leveraging your network to help your clients, and that's the way to do it. Clearly, in my view, shouldn't matter whether it's a man or a woman doing it. It does in reality to a certain extent, but I think attitudes are changing. The question in future then may well be, with so much change, not about man and woman, but about knowing yourself, about knowing about yourself and being authentic, rather than any classification of equality or the lack of it. Let me conclude by saying Beyond Bias redresses some ancient wrongs with practical observations, although who can say where we're going and where we will end up? The book is a major start on this new road, so do read it soon, and I mean that because I think we've got to start thinking about unleashing the potential of women in business, and this book is, I think, a very useful step in the right direction. There it is again, front page, spine, and there's a little bit on the back, a little bit of basic information, some of which I've mentioned a little bit in the review. Just opening it up in the middle, Beyond Bias, this is psychological inflexibility. So there's a lot of information here, some of which people may not like to talk about. There's research evidence. There's quite a lot of justification about how things are put forward. Very useful references, I thought, because this is what I would describe as a substantial work. It's a slim book, but it's a substantial work in its own right. And I think the references at the end of each of the chapters are, well, most of the chapters anyway, are extremely helpful. So a big thank you to Laura Slater and all the contributors on what I think is an important book for the future. We'd like to see an end to this sort of bias. It's a very fundamental bias. It's more fundamental than anything else, because half the human world is female. And so you've got to look at it not just in terms of any other type of bias or inequality. It's such a fundamental one that it has to be probably dealt with before anything else. But there are so many cultural and other issues. This is a start. Do read the book. Thanks to everybody concerned. Bye-bye.